Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Presley Strother. I'm a CCDA staff member. Thank you for joining us today for Disability Rights in Today's World, celebrating 34 years of the ADA and 25 years of Olmstead. This session is being recorded. The California Commission on Disability Access and the Pacific ADA Center are excited to have you here for part 2 of a 3-part 2024 webinar collaboration series. Today, we will take you through the evolution of the ADA and several landmark court cases that have helped solidify a path to accessibility for all. For housekeeping, please keep your audio muted during the webinar. Please use the Q&A feature to post your questions. And the chat feature is distracting for people with vision disabilities who use screen reading softwares. For the Zoom viewing options, in the upper right-hand corner, select View for speaker or gallery views, and the screen share can be standard or side-by-side options. During the PowerPoint, view option menu at the top of the screen to adjust the zoom, ratio, and other features. During the PowerPoint, use the slider between the shared screen and participants to slide the screen to your preference. We do have captions here today. I would like to thank our captioner for being here. To turn on captions, by selecting the CC icon, Show Captions, on the menu bar, you will be able to turn them on. To change the size of the captions, select the up arrow next to the CC and choose Caption Settings. To move the captions, you can hover over the captions and drag them to the preferred location. And then to turn off your captions, select CC icon and to hide captions. We will have a Q&A session. To ask a question, select Q&A at the bottom of your screen. The example to the left will show what the box looks like. It is the question and answer. Welcome to Q&A, and you'll be able to type your question in there, and we may be able to review it later on. The Q&A session will be at the end after the panel, and selected questions will be answered. With that, I would like to thank again everyone for being here, and I will pass it over to our Executive Director, April Dawson.
Thank you, Presley. Good afternoon, everyone. This is April. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to start by going over our agenda for today before I introduce my co-presenter. We're going to be talking about disability rights in today's world, celebrating 34 years of the ADA and 25 years of the Olmstead decision. We're going to start with introduction, and then we're going to move on to a little bit of a survey about the history of some prominent disability rights laws, such as Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, as well as the Americans with Disabilities Act. And then from there, we're going to talk about some court cases and recent decisions, various rulemaking decisions that are impacting disability access in today's world. And then we are going to talk about what does disability rights and pride look like in the future. And we're going to hear from some self-advocates. And with that, I'd like to introduce my co-presenter, Jan Garrett, who's going to talk a little bit about where she is from in the world. Jan?
Thank you, April. Sorry, I have to unmute when April mutes. So thank you very much. So I am Jan Garrett, and I am the deputy. Whoops, I think we're getting a feedback here. Yeah, I think you need to turn off. Sorry about that. One moment.
Oh.
Just mute myself. Okay. Okay. Now you're still hearing me, right? Presley?
Yes, we can hear you, Jan.
Okay, good. So I am the Deputy Director of ADA Programs for the Pacific ADA Center. And what we provide at the Pacific ADA Center is technical assistance. And what we mean by that is informal guidance, not legal advice, by phone and by email on the ADA and on other disability civil rights laws. We also provide trainings, like this is one example as a webinar, but we also provide in-person trainings. And then we provide webinars regularly as well, quarterly webinars on ADA rights. And then we also do webinars with CCDA, and we do ADA and healthcare webinars every other month. Also, we provide materials, usually in the form of links in our emails to folks and through our website. So lots and lots of materials and information out there on the ADA. And then every year we have an in-person and a virtual conference This year, our in-person conference will be October 9th and 10th in Sacramento, which is where we are today. So that will be great, and hopefully you will all look out for the announcements about that. Okay, thank you, and let me mute and turn it back over to April.
Thanks, Jan. And just so that everyone knows, due to feedback, since we're sitting next to everyone in a room, there's going to be a little bit of a gap when the presenters switch, but it's not you, it's us. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what the California Commission on Disability Access is all about. I have had the pleasure of being the executive director of the CCDA since August of 2022, so coming up on 2 years now. So the California Commission on Disability Access, or CCDA, is a 17-member public commission that was founded by the state legislature in 2009. And it was really an effort between the disability and business communities to create a space where we could have really bold conversations around disability access to businesses. And so our main focus is educating the business community about how to incorporate people with disabilities into their business plans and their day-to-day operations, and how to comply with disability rights laws that we're going to be talking about today. So we do a lot of small business education and outreach. We create technical materials and trainings. Many of you may have seen on our social media page all about accessible parking. We just created a really great technical manual on accessible parking for business owners, as well as accessible parking for the construction industry. Go to our resources page, which we'll talk about later in the webinar, to talk through that and learn about that. We also host regional listening forums and webinars. This is one example of the webinars that we partner with the Pacific ADA and other groups to educate the business and disability communities about the rights of people with disabilities. And the listening forums that we do are regional based. We just completed a listening forum in partnership with the Newport Beach Chamber of Commerce and the Dale McIntosh Center in Orange County 2 weeks ago. And our next one will be in the fall in Sacramento. So watch our social media pages for information about that. We also do disability access litigation data tracking. So by law, law firms and attorneys who are involved, who file in federal or state court construction-related alleged disability access violation claims or alleged website accessibility claims are legally obligated to submit copies of those to us. We then aggregate the data in our legal portal, and we use that to create an annual report to the legislature where we educate the legislature about trends in disability access litigation. And we come up with based on our data, the top 10 alleged disability access violations. And we use that to determine what trainings and topics for our trainings, as well as what regions in California we should be reaching out to assist those businesses with complying with disability rights laws and getting more customers. And I'm proud to say that we have a lot of really great partners, such as the California Business Properties Association and others, such as CFILC and other disability rights groups who work with us regularly. And we're really here to create a public space to talk about disability access to businesses and to come up with creative solutions that is not in a courtroom. And we also are not involved in enforcement. So when businesses come to us, we're not going to report you or anything like that. We're here to help you understand your obligations and support you. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Jan.
Okay, everyone. Thank you so much. So we're going to start out in looking at some disability rights laws. Of course, we're going to talk about the ADA because it's almost the 34th anniversary, but we'll also talk about one of the laws that was really the foundation for the ADA, which is the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and specifically Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. It is one of the first federal civil rights protection laws for people with disabilities, and that was in the 1970s as the law was passed in 1973. But what happened was that the regulations were never implemented. So a large group of people with disabilities had to actually protest for 26 days at the federal building in San Francisco to get the regulations implemented. So that was in 1977. And what the law does is that it makes sure that individuals with disabilities have equal access to education, employment, and public services. And it also applies to businesses and organizations that receive federal funding or contracts. So a lot of times healthcare organizations, other businesses will receive federal financial assistance. And so 504 would then come into play to actually apply to those organizations. And it does mandate accessible facilities and buildings, as well as accessible services for people with disabilities to receive goods and services for customers. Okay, and let me mute.
Thanks, Jan. So those of you who are familiar with disability rights laws are probably familiar with rulemaking, and a law is no good if you don't pass the regulations that actually tell the regulatory authority how to make the law actually work in reality. And so that is what led to the 1977 504 sit-in. Individuals with disabilities demanded action to implement and enforce the Section 504 regulations and protections. And the 1977 504 sit-in is still the longest nonviolent occupation of a federal building in the United States. It ran from April 5th to April 30th, which was 25 days in San Francisco, California, at what was then called the Hugh Building, the Health, Education, and Welfare Department. And it set a precedent for future activism and legislation, including the Americans with Disabilities Act. And in this picture, you see a group of people. Unfortunately, they're all gone now, gone to another plane, but Judy Heumann is on the right. We also have several other prominent disability rights activists in that photo as well. And it really showed, you know, during that sit-in, it wasn't just people with disabilities, but it was also people from other intersectional identities who supported the occupation and really showed that, you know, a lot of what the disability rights movement it was founded on was premises from other civil rights movements, such as, you know, the movement for civil rights for African Americans and women and other people of color, as well as the LGBTQI+ community. So that really shows that the disability community is very much an intersectional community. And I am going to pass it back to Jan.
Okay, thank you, April. So what 504 ultimately led to, because that was kind of the first disability civil rights law, but they realized that there were a lot of places that were not covered by 504 because they were not federal facilities or they did not receive federal money. And that's why the disability community said, no, we need a broader law. We need a bigger law. And that's why the ADA came about. So the ADA was signed into law on July 26th of 1990. So next week, it will be 34 years old. And President George H.W. Bush signed the ADA into law, and it prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities and ensures equal opportunity and access to employment, education, transportation, and all public and private places open to the public. So it's a much, much broader law than the Rehabilitation Act. And this photo actually shows some of the advocates that are surrounding George H.W. Bush on the lawn of the White House, signing the ADA into law on July 26, 1990.
Thanks, Jan. This is April. So let's talk a little bit about the titles of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Title I has to do with employment. Title II has to do with public entities, which are state and local governments, and also public transportation entities. Title III is public accommodations, which are also Businesses and nonprofits are examples of places of public accommodation. And Title IV is telecommunications. And Title V are some miscellaneous protections. And so those are the titles that make up the ADA. So as to Jan's point, it's a very comprehensive civil rights law that deals with every aspect of a person with a disability's interaction with their environment, whether it's at work or when you're going to get a cup of coffee or using the phone or taking the bus or interacting with your state and local government, going to vote or something, or going to, going into a state and federal, a state and local government building to conduct business, those kinds of things. The federal government is actually not covered under the ADA, it's covered under 504. So that's why you don't see that there. Jan?
Okay. So we have the ADA in 1990, and it does protect people with a wide variety of disabilities. And in fact, when the ADA was first passed, a lot of courts were making decisions and saying, well, we don't think this is a person with a disability. We don't think that person's a person with a disability. So finally in 2008, Congress actually took up the law again after the initial passage of the ADA in 1990 and said, no, we intend the ADA to be broad. We intend for it to apply to a lot of different people. And the courts are simply getting it wrong all over the country. And so what happened was Congress passed the ADA Amendments Act of 2008. So under the ADA Amendments Act, what is now just kind of considered the ADA, an individual with a disability is a person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities, or has a record of such an impairment, in other words, a history or a record of it, or is regarded as or perceived as having a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. So that is the kind of overall three-part definition of the disability under the ADA. And I think a lot of people don't realize kind of what that means. So we're going to go into that a little bit more.
Thanks, Jan. This is April. So let's talk a little bit about the ADA's impact on business. So the ADA impact on business has to do with Title III of the ADA. And what I mentioned earlier is that that's also known as places of public accommodation. And that is the main title that the CCDA, the California Commission on Disability Access, works on. And so the ADA's impact on business included, increasing accessibility in stores, restaurants, and other public businesses. It created legal requirements for modifying existing facilities and new compliant construction requirements. Also, businesses are also required to do reasonable modifications, such as maybe installing a ramp, widening doorways, making sure that their restrooms are accessible, and also providing staff training on ADA compliance and disability awareness.
Okay. Whoops.
Took me a second.
That's okay. So another part of the ADA is actually a court decision that was reached by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1999. And it's known as Olmstead versus LC. And LC was Lois Clark, who has since passed on. But there were two women actually who came forward and said, we want to live in the community and we think we can, and our medical professionals think we can live in the community with supports. But for some reason, the state of Georgia thinks that we need to stay in an institution. And the state of Georgia is pushing all its money toward institutionalizing people instead of helping people be able to live in the community. And so what Olmstead decided by the U.S. Supreme Court was that unjustified segregation. So actually, we had a little discussion about this earlier about what is unjustified segregation. Is segregation ever justified? I think that's a viable question. But they ruled that unjustified segregation of people with disabilities violates the ADA. So what that essentially said to states is that you need to come up with Olmstead plans, and you need to have plans that say, we're going to put a lot of money into people living in the community and into the supports people might need to live in the community, instead of putting all our money toward nursing homes and mental health institutions and developmental disability institutions, etc. So Olmstead is a really key decision. And as we celebrate the 34th anniversary of the ADA, we now celebrate the 25th anniversary of Olmstead as well, so that people with disabilities do have the right to live in their communities.
Thanks, Jan. This is April. So let's talk about another court case from 2023 that caused a lot of buzz, Atchison Hotels LLC versus Lawfer. And so that one is something that for many of us who work in the civil rights field, there's something called testers. So for example, in fair housing law, a fair housing organization might ask someone who is let's say someone who is Black or a different race to be a tester, go to an apartment complex and pretend to be a renter to see if they're discriminated against on the basis of their protected status, whether it be their race or something else. So that's an example of like what a tester is. That has a long history in disability as well as other civil rights worlds. And so Atchison Hotels versus Lawfer was really trying to decide whether testers who investigate ADA compliance can sue businesses for discrimination when their rights are violated under the ADA. So this particular case had to do with a woman who was living in a state, and she went on a hotel website. She found that the hotel website was not accessible, and so she sued that her rights were violated. And so that conversation was really about, does she have standing because she was being a tester and not actually planning to stay at that hotel? It also touched on the accessibility of hotel websites as well. The DOJ, even though the DOJ has not published regulations related to Title III of the ADA, it has always said that a business's accessibility also extends to its online offerings. And so that's also something that is very important as well, is that if a person goes on a business website, that website they should have the same exact ability to navigate that website and be able, for example, in a hotel situation, be able to pick an accessible room, be able to learn the features of the hotel, be able to have all the access that a non-disabled person who's trying to stay at a hotel has. And so we're going to keep monitoring this to see what the long-term impacts are related to testers as well as website access for people with disabilities.
Okay, thank you, April. This is Jan. So the impact of that case on businesses is that it reinforces the need for businesses to provide accessible information online. Most all of us use websites to find information about businesses. What does the restaurant's menu have? What's available at that hotel? Do they have a pool? What availability do they have? All of these things are mostly done on the internet now. And so businesses really need to understand that they must make their websites and any mobile apps that they have accessible to people with disabilities, people who use screen readers, people who have limited dexterity like me, people who if they put videos on their website, they need to make sure they're captioned for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. So all of those things need to happen on websites. And the Justice Department just recently came out with a part of the regulation on ADA Title II, meaning state and local government websites, and that those have to be accessible either in 2 years or 3 years, depending on the size of the government entity. But they've also always said, as April said, that businesses and nonprofits have to make sure that their websites also are accessible, just as part of their obligation to provide effective communication. And that's a requirement under the ADA and has been since the beginning of the ADA. So understand that you have to make sure that customers with disabilities have equal access to your information and the services that you provide. Okay, and then let's go to the next one. So also, we have Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act. Many people know about the Affordable Care Act. Some people call it Obamacare, but a lot of people actually now have health care because of the Affordable Care Act. And Section 1557 prohibits discrimination based on race, color, national origin, sex, age, or disability in health programs or activities that receive federal financial assistance. So this is a really important part of the law that says you cannot discriminate against people in healthcare programs and activities. And it promotes health equity and ensures equal access to healthcare services. Because many times people with disabilities were facing things like they would just be examined in their wheelchair and not thoroughly examined. They wouldn't be able to transfer over to, healthcare equipment. They would just be treated poorly by doctors and nurses. So Section 1557 says, no, you can't do that. It prohibits discrimination in the healthcare area, not only based on disability, but based on all the protected classes of race, color, national origin, sex, and age as well.
Thanks, Jan. And it's important that this also covers telehealth and patient care decision support tools. And it requires healthcare organizations to provide modifications to policies and practices to accommodate individuals with disabilities. So I'm a wheelchair user. An example of that, a living example of that is every 2 years, I get a mammogram. And so I was able to go to my healthcare organization a couple of weeks ago and wheel right up to the mammography machine. And it was fully accessible for my wheelchair to be able to use that. Because what a lot of people don't realize is that people with disabilities are more likely than the general population to be diagnosed with secondary conditions. And there's nothing inherent about the disability experience that says that needs to happen, right? So if a mammography machine, for an example, is not accessible to a person with a disability, a wheelchair, for example, in this example, that person might have breast cancer and not know it, and that may cause them to die if they did not have, all because they did not have access to the tools that they needed to be able to get that early testing. So that's an example of why Section 1557 is so important. Thank you.
Okay, so this is Jan speaking, and I'll just quickly say I also am a person with a lived experience of disability. I use a wheelchair, and I am a breast cancer survivor. And I found that through that is like, I am kind of a living example of why that is so important to be able to get that. And I have to get tested every year to make sure it hasn't come back. And it's been almost 5 years. So that's, so important. So in addition to Section 1557 and the healthcare requirements, there is also, as I just mentioned briefly a moment ago, a new rule that is part of the ADA Title II regulations now about website accessibility for state and local governments. And the Attorney General Merrick Garland signed the final rule to ensure that digital content on state and local governments will have accessibility. And again, people do have public entities have either 2 years or 3 years to comply with this fully, but they should really start now, because you have no idea how much digital content you may have to go through to actually make sure that it's all accessible. And there's only a certain number of exceptions for your websites and your mobile apps. So I would really encourage you, even though there's a grace period of moving into this regulation, I would encourage all Title II entities to start start now, actually looking at their websites and mobile apps. And, for inaccessible technologies, as we were talking about before, also, they can exclude people from critical services. They can exclude people from, being able to pay their bills or being able to find out what the city council is doing in their neighborhood, or, any of those kinds of issues. And so making sure that you're offering all of that information to everybody, every resident in your city pays taxes and lives there and deserves to be able to have that information.
Thanks, Jan. And what I would add to that is the California Commission on Disability Access, or CCDA, is required under Assembly Bill 2917 to provide website accessibility education for businesses. And so to comply with that, we are creating a website accessibility toolkit, which will be released either later this year or early next year, which will cover website accessibility for businesses. Now, as Jan mentioned, this latest regulation covers Title II, but Title III entities should really be paying close attention because it is highly likely that that regulation, that is the recommendation that you should be following. Because the DOJ, as we mentioned before, has been very clear about what it recommends. That it recommends that the WCAG, now it regulates in Title II, but recommends to businesses that WCAG 2.0 is the standard that you should be looking at for your website. You can always contact the Pacific ADA Center or the CCDA for more information, and we can point you to some resources if you're a Title III entity or a Title II entity about website accessibility. But WCAG 2.0 is really what you should be aiming for as your standard if you're a business, and look for our toolkit coming out in the next couple of weeks. Thank you.
Thanks, April. This is Jan. So now we move on to sort of the fun part of today, because not that April and I aren't fun, we are a laugh riot. But I think it's really much more fun to have a panel discussion and to be able to also hear from you eventually. What are your questions? What are your thoughts about the ADA as we enter this 34th year of the ADA? So I want to turn it back over, I guess, to our panelists, and I guess Presley will introduce our panelists. So take it away, Presley.
Thank you. I would first like to thank Jan and April for the informative presentation so far. We're going to go into our next agenda item, ADA in the Future panel discussion. CCDA Executive Director Dawson Rawlings and Pacific ADA Center Deputy Director of ADA Programs Garrett will be joined by Whitney Clark, a self-advocate, and Sonya Ravipati, a Pacific ADA Center intern, for the panel discussion. Each of our panelists will bring a point of view and their experiences to our discussion. We look forward to engaging in the panel discussion. Please remember to post any of your questions in the Q&A, for there will be a Q&A session after this. So I will begin our discussion and I'll ask these questions, and feel free, answer one at a time, and we can have a nice conversation about it. So to begin our discussion, I will open our question.
Presley froze a little bit.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so to start with question one, how has the ADA impacted your life? To all our panelists.
Okay, hi, my name's Sonya. Oh, should we turn? Okay, so the ADA has given me protections and opportunities. Ramps on buildings not only help people in wheelchairs, but it also helps someone like me who has difficulty walking or often trips. The expansive definitions that Jan mentioned under ADA AA help someone like me who has multiple disabilities, but especially things like learning differences that often get ignored as a disability. At my private school, when teachers were not providing reasonable accommodations, which is required under the ADA, or my disability, I was able to use the fact that I was experiencing something illegal under the ADA to push the school into action and to ensure that I got my rights. The ADA backs up my rights and my accommodations, and my life would be a lot harder without it.
Thank you for your response. Is there anybody else on our panel that would like to speak to this question?
I'm Whitney, by the way, but I can try and answer this question. If that's okay with you, April. Well, by question number 1, and it's just my best guess, but I think I would have to say by helping others with just disabilities or like whatever help they might need help with or anything like that. And that's all I can think of right now.
Thank you for your response. Jan or April, would you like to speak on this, or should I move on to question 2?
Hi, this is April. Sorry about that. We have a feedback. We apologize. We're sitting next to each other in a room, and we apologize for the feedback issues. Well, I think that the ADA has really impacted my life in a lot of different ways. I recently had the pleasure of attending a Disability Pride event at the governor's office, and the governor presented a resolution declaring July Disability Pride Month. And I was able to share a little bit about my experience with the attendees. And what I shared was that the ADA came to be when I was 9 years old. And that was about the time, when I started to realize that I wasn't the same as other kids. I was born with spina bifida. At the time, I used leg braces and crutches, and now I'm a wheelchair user. So my disability has evolved with me as I've aged, and now I'm a wheelchair user, which helps me to get around a lot easier than trying to use crutches at this point in my life with everything I've got to accomplish. And the ADA helps me make sure that, when I need to go to the store or I need to have a modification in my vehicle to be able to drive independently, go out on a date with my husband, go to the lap pool and make sure that there's a lift at the lap pool, as well as making sure that the door to get into the pool is accessible. It helps me when I apply for job opportunities and I know that I have the right to be treated the same as other candidates. So it helps me in every aspect of my life. But getting back to, that 9-year-old girl that I was, as I was growing up, I didn't have a lot of pride in my disability. In fact, I really just didn't want anything to do with my disability. Even though my disability discloses for me, I really just was kind of hoping that, I'll just rack up a bunch of accomplishments and maybe my disability will go away. I thought it was really something to run away from. And the ADA was passed around the time that I was really starting to get bullied in school and seeing myself as different than other people. And I remember when the ADA was passed, my father telling me about it and saying, this is for you and for people who are like you, and that, now you have the right to do whatever you want and you can be whoever you want to be. And it really helped to, even though it took me a couple more years to really come into my own power about my disability, it really did help plant the seed for a civil rights mindset in my life. So it really has impacted every aspect of my life and helped me, helped provide a good grounding so that I could thrive and use all of my abilities to be the person that I am today.
Thank you so much for your input, April. Jan, before I move on, is there anything you would like to speak on?
Sorry about that. I was having trouble unmuting. So so I'll just say, so I was born with my disability. I was born missing all 4 of my limbs and use a power wheelchair. I'm a little bit older than everybody else on this panel discussion. So when the ADA was passed, I was actually graduating from law school. That's the summer I graduated from law school. And it immediately sort of impacted my life in that my graduation site was up on a stage in a building and they did not have a lift or ramp to the stage. And they said, well, we'll just come down and we'll just put your hood on you in the audience. And I said, you know what? Graduations are so that the families can see people receive their diplomas and receive their hoods. And my family won't be able to see me very well down in the audience where everybody else is on the floor. So no, what you're going to do, law school, is that you're going to get a lift and you are going to put that in the venue, and I am going to go up on the stage with everybody else and be able to receive the diploma. So it was kind of my first advocacy moment as a lawyer, and I didn't pass the bar yet, but I was at least a graduate of law school, and it was, you know, coming into my own to understand that I now had some rights that I would have going forward. And you know, the Rehabilitation Act already applied to my school because they got federal funding. So it was really, you know, I was trying to explain to them all the reasons why they had to do all these things for me. So my life has changed dramatically in those 34 years since I graduated from law school and have been able to work and access my community. And like April says, go places with my husband and, you know, really enjoy my life. And I think that's what the ADA is there for and has given to so many people, whether you have a really obvious disability or whether you have a non-obvious or non-apparent disability. It is there for everyone, and it really should continue to be there into the future.
Thank you so much for that answer, Jan. And to everyone on the panel, thank you for answering question number 1. Let's go on to question number 2. What impact has the Olmstead decision had on your ability to live independently and participate in community activities?
Can I please say something about this question? So, about question number 2, living, and this is Whitney again, about question number 2, I really do like living on my own, and it's the best thing ever for me. But I just wanted to say that. But as far as like community activities or whatnot, I go out on walks a lot on my own. But I mean, the walk itself is very good exercise for me. But that's what I know about that.
Thank you so much, Whitney. I will question 2 out to the panel.
Yeah. So while I live more independently because my disability maybe doesn't directly impact that ability, I still think that there's an importance to the community that Olmstead provides. I think just whether you're disabled or not, it's really beneficial to have disabled people and see that representation around the community. And it's important for raising awareness and to make the disability rights movement more powerful. And I also think that Olmstead provides so much dignity for the disabled community because it makes us independent, it makes us human. And I think that's really powerful.
Thank you, Sonya. That definitely is really powerful. I will pass it over to April and Jan if you have any input.
Thanks, Presley. Well, some of the things that I think about with the Olmstead decision, it doesn't, some of the things that I'm going to talk about impact the people that I love and not me necessarily directly, but I have a lot of loved ones who require caregivers to live independently in the community. And if they did not have access to things like, Medicaid waivers or caregiver services, they would have to live in an institution. And so one of the ways that state governments comply with Olmstead is creating things like, Medicaid waivers and programs that ensure that the services that a person who needs, I'll put in quotes, a high level of care would need would normally get in a facility, but not in a way that would allow them to fully be integrated in the community, can instead be provided in their home, in their community choice, in their place of community choice. And I can just share that, being able to be a part of my friends' lives and my other loved ones' lives while they're experiencing that, it makes me think of my own life as my disability, changes over time and I age with my disability. I want to make sure that I live in a community that accepts me and it allows me to fully participate. And my hope is that I'll be able to have access to community supports when I need them, such as caregivers if I need them someday, or other things, so that I will not be at a greater risk for institutionalization. Jan, do you have any thoughts on this?
Okay, I'm going to be the bad person here a little bit because Olmstead is wonderful and it has really made a huge difference for so many people, and so many people get services and supports that deserve them and need them. I will say that I have worked virtually all my life, and although it's a good thing that I've been able to make decent money working at nonprofits and government jobs, I have always made too much money to qualify for any services and supports. So even though I have a very significant disability, use a power wheelchair, and my husband now is developing disabilities that I'm not able to help him with. So what we have always had to do is to pay out of our pocket for our attendant care, for our services and supports. And my husband's always been my primary caregiver. Mostly I need assistance in the morning with showering and dressing, and I'm pretty independent otherwise, but even that has been challenging. And my husband was in the hospital for almost a month and had to pay for extra folks to help us. And so I just really think we need to address the issue of the policy of Olmstead, and why are we actually telling people that work and earn decent money and achieve things in their work life, why are we telling them, no, you don't get those services and supports? You don't get that. You just have to pay out of your pocket for your van with the ramp, for your attendant care, for helping care for your loved ones. So I'm kind of unhappy about that, to be honest with you. And I think there needs to be a policy change, even though I think there is a lot of good that Olmstead has done for many, many people in the community. But there are just a lot of us that get left behind. And I think we need to address that at some point.
Thank you for your answer.
Um,
We will be going on to question number 3 for our panel. What are your favorite apps or tools for accessibility?
For this one, this for number one, it's hard for me to describe, but I would have to say that I don't have any tools to use for accessibility because I go on walks all the time.
I think, oop, I think, oop. I think that you cannot underestimate the power of iPhones and that sort of digital technology because it has done so much for accessibility and also, as I was talking about earlier, representation, because it's not only me that's using an iPhone, but it's millions of other people. And I think on that, there's so many different things that you could do, whether that's like font size, or for me, I have visual impairments, so I use like lighting, I really dim the lighting. Also, in like a school environment, I find Notability so helpful to take photos and also to record when I find it too difficult to write something. And it makes it just so I can pay attention and actually be a participant and the student that I want to be. Additionally, things like Speechify or text to speech are so helpful for me as someone who struggles to read. And then on the vice versa of that, voice to text is so helpful for me when I can't figure out how to spell a word and autocorrect is not helping me. And I think that another aspect of that in terms of like voice text things is audiobooks. I know about 5 years ago, I really struggled to find audiobooks. And while I am like almost completely, that's all I read, I couldn't find any. And now about 5 years later, it's everywhere. And I think that I credit a little bit of the pandemic to that, but also I'm just grateful that if I want to read a book, there's a high likelihood that I can find it in the format that best suits me and my disability.
Thank you so much for those perspectives, Whitney and Sonya. I will pass it over to Jan.
Okay, yeah, and this is similar to what Sonya was saying, definitely being able to dictate text. And I know April was doing that earlier today too. All of us use the dictation software, although sometimes Siri just is there when you don't want her to be, but that's okay. She's there when you need her as well. And being able to read books, on my iPad is really a game changer because I can't hold a book down, a physical book, to be able to read it, a paperback. And so being able to do that on my iPad or having audiobooks is a huge thing. And then at work, I also use what's called Dragon Naturally Speaking, which is I have a microphone and software and I can dictate emails and I can dictate documents, etc. And, it's interesting because what I found out recently is that my Dragon does not know how to spell accessibility. Isn't that hilarious? It like misspelled, it has 3 C's in it. So I had to actually correct that in my Dragon Naturally Speaking, but I just thought, wow, gosh, God, can't you train Dragon Naturally Speaking to spell accessibility? So anyway, but all of those things are really, really helpful for me in the world and being able to use my voice instead of having to use a stylus or a pen or anything else. So that's so helpful for me.
Yeah, this is April. When I think about apps and tools, I think a lot about universal design. Like if you think about the iPhone, wasn't created for people with disabilities specifically, but, Apple is an example of a company that made sure that there were universal design features in the iPhone that anybody could use that also benefit people with disabilities. So I think, universal design is something that we should take for granted. Things like Alexa. So like, when I'm strolling with my wheelchair, I use Siri on my iPhone. And then when I'm home, if I want to listen to music or if I want to turn the lights on and off, we have a smart home system where we just say, Alexa, turn on the lights, or Alexa, turn off the lights. And we also have an electric door opener in our home because my husband and I both use wheelchairs. And so that's also operated by Alexa. So we just activate our Open Sesame and it allows us to not scrape our door with our wheelchairs and independently get in and out of our apartment. I also use a shower chair, which helps me to transfer safely from my wheelchair in and out of the shower so that I don't risk, breaking a bone or something like that or falling. And also, I was also thinking about when I moved into a new apartment recently. I recently got married and my husband and I moved into a new place. And I asked my mom to help me make sure that our kitchen was accessible. So she helped me do some simple hacks to make sure that I had access to everything you know, on lower shelves, and she made our pantry wheelchair accessible for me. And so those kinds of things are things that I think can benefit everyone, people who are aging, people who are, you know, children, also just my example about using the phone, you know, business people, anyone can benefit from these things. So when you plan for access for people, you're really planning for better environment for everyone. So disability access is really human access. And, you know, I really don't like the term special needs, you know, or special accommodations, because, you know, everybody has to eat, everybody has to go to work, everybody has to get somewhere. And so I don't think that those needs are special. They're just being human.
Thank you for that. And thank you to all our panelists for question 3. Learned a lot about different apps and tools for accessibility. Moving on to question 4, how can businesses, schools, and local governments better address barriers to support people with disabilities?
I believe that barriers to support are best addressed by those the support actually benefits. I think that when people address those barriers to support, they really should be talking to the disabled community and seeing what they need. I think those opinions, complaints, and concerns are so important, especially not even just at the beginning, but continuous input is what we need so that those barriers can continually be addressed. And I also think that there's something about nothing about us without us, that quote. And I think if you're going to address those barriers of support, you need to do it with us. And I think also it can, you know, just be creating community, and that can be a way to address support, whether that's like a club at school for disabled people, or, you know, it doesn't, community spaces cost little to no money, but it can provide a sense of support. That's just one small way that we can address those barriers and address those stigmas.
Thank you so much, Sonya. Panelists, would anyone else like to input?
I know when I was younger, this is Julie Guyana. I know when I was younger, they didn't have a lot of access for people with disabilities who were mainstream in the schools, especially if you lived in a little small country like I did. So, what my mom had to do was go to the city, go to the school district, get formally known. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with Area Board 12 back in the old days. Involved in my little life to make sure there were ramps built. I had aid to write out my work where I had to dictate letter for letter and all that. And this was back in the 80s. They've made a lot of good changes for people that have disabilities who are students, and I'm very happy about that. The one thing I could say they need to continue is don't keep 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 us working together in the community as a whole. Don't separate us. If we're disabled, people who are disabled, we need to be out in the community working together with everybody, especially people my age that have a lot of experience with advocacy, and everybody on this panel today, because we are the ones that are going to make sure these changes are being made. So that's my suggestion is, you know, sure, we need our programs. We need, you know, to go to our services and things like that. But focus more on the community as a whole. And I never got to comment on Jan's comment earlier, so is there gonna be an opportunity where I'll be able to do that later?
Julie, yes, we're going to have a Q&A at the after the panel discussion.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Thank you so much for your input. And I will go back to our panel members if anyone else wants to give their input.
Hi, this is Jan speaking. So I have a lot to say about how businesses, schools, and governments, but we only have a limited time here. But at any rate, one of the things is make sure that you're training your staff. So not only think about physical accessibility, but think about training your staff and how to be more inclusive of everyone. And don't make people with disabilities feel quote unquote special, or that we're inspirational, or whatever it is. The only way that I'm okay with being inspirational is if I inspire you to get off your butt and make inclusion better for people with disabilities. So that's the way I want to be inspirational. But that I think businesses and schools can also understand that people with disabilities are customers, and we bring you, we bring nonprofits, people to take advantage of their programs and statistics that they need to have their programs. We bring businesses, goods and services and profits. And so understand that, and don't assume that we're coming in and we're going to be a fire hazard in your restaurant, or that you don't have to maintain your accessible features, like storing your extra toilet paper in your toilet stall. Make sure that you're maintaining your accessible features once you have them. Train your staff. Just make sure that you're thinking about full inclusion for everyone, whether they have a physical disability or any other type of disability. Just think about inclusion generally.
Thank you so much, Jan.
This is April. I want to add on to a little bit to what Jan said. I really feel like all of us have a shared responsibility to providing equal access in our community. It starts with all of us. So for the person with the disability, the way that these disability access laws we talked about earlier are written is that the onus is on us to identify a problem. So and unfortunately, and I don't know if I want to say unfortunately, because absolutely, we wouldn't be where we are without a lot of high impact litigation. But I do want to say that the way that these laws are written is that if we see an access barrier, the onus is on us to report it, and if necessary, file a complaint about it and seek our remedies. But one of the things that I like to do at CCDA is really to promote conversations at the local level about how all of us can be proactive in ways that include things like, making sure that, that if you are a business owner, for example, you're building relationships, with disability organizations in your community, maybe having an independent living center night, or have a supported living night or something like that, where you're inviting customers with disabilities into your space. You're asking them for feedback. Hey, how did that counter work for you? Or what did this new feature we added create a unintended barrier for you? And get to know your customers with disabilities just like you get to know any of your other customers, and don't be afraid of them. Don't be afraid of us. As Jan said, maintain your accessible features. I will tell you that I am someone who likes to have a good glass of wine. And when I pull up to that accessible bar, I don't want to see your dirty dishes. I don't want to see your point of sale machine or all of your brochures for all the cool stuff to do in town. I just want to see a nice flat dining surface. So just remember, maintain your accessible features. The accessible bar is not the place for all your stuff. Make sure that you're thinking about all the aspects of how a person with a disability could access your business, from the front door all the way to the bathroom, to the seat, all of the places that they have to utilize whatever service that you're providing, and just seek input from your customers. Also, if you go to CCDA's website, you can learn more about programs that are available to help businesses in your area to afford disability access improvements, such as how to hire a certified access specialist. Those are people who are certified by the state of California to go into businesses and conduct accessibility improvement surveys to check out your business and give you advice on the things that you need to fix. Also, if you're a manager or an owner, remember disability access, that consciousness starts at the top. So you don't have to be, the CEO of the company to care about it, but you should be. And then that'll trickle down to all of your employees. So make sure that you have someone in charge at your business of doing regular access checks and engaging with the disability community and your customer base about access. Have regular disability access reviews of your business, and make sure that you're also hiring and retaining employees with disabilities. And if you do advertising for your business, make sure that people with disabilities are seen in your architect renderings, for example, or in your print ads, or in your social media feeds. Because the more that we normalize people with disabilities doing everyday regular things, the more that we can demystify this idea that people with disabilities, are just people who are kind of off to the side, who aren't going anywhere, but they are your customers. Also, I want to share a little bit about how local governments can help. There is a program that is, there's a fund that is maintained by the Division of the State Architect called the Disability Access Education Revolving Fund. And at the local level, it's called, is it called at the local level, Jan? It's called something different at the local level, but for every $4 of a business license fee for a municipality, whether it's a city or a county or a combination of both, depending on how the business licenses and permit system is set up in that municipality, every $4 of that goes into a fund. 10% of it goes to the state architect for the DAR fund. And then the remaining 90% stays local in a special fund. And it is designed to be used for a couple of different things, mainly for the education and retention of certified access specialists, as well as now there's new legislation that was passed a year ago that allows municipalities to set up programs that can help businesses retain CASPs and to perform access remediation. So San Diego has their Places of Spaces program, and the city of San Jose is another example who has piloted with those funds information about what they have is they have a tiered system where, depending on what your small business budget is, they will help you with a grant for access remediations and also for CASP inspections. So those are just examples of how local governments can also partner with businesses and partner with self-advocates and people with disabilities to make change. I know I didn't really touch on schools, but I've been out of school for a little while, but I don't know, maybe Sonya has more to add on that. But those are my thoughts on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I believe, Whitney, is there anything that you would like to say to this question? Or we can move on to question number 5.
Well, if I remember, let me look at the question real quick before I answer. I remember when I went to the Pacific Grove High School and I graduated from there in 2004, but there were not a whole lot of my friends that had just like walking disabilities, but there were some other people that did not. So I guess I would have to say that with this question, I would help other people out and all of that.
Thank you so much, Whitney. Thank you for all the panelists and their input. I will move on to the next question. What role do you think social media plays in the disability rights movement for your generations? And this is for everyone.
I can start. For most of my life, I felt isolated and ashamed of my disability, but during the pandemic, at my most isolated, social media really started to play a role in my life in a way that I was able to find community and understanding, especially around my disability, because of disabled creators. I can list many, but I remember specifically, if you've heard of Crutches and Spice, she has cerebral palsy, which I also have, and I remember thinking, oh wow, like we have the same disability. I think social media provides a network where you can see a community that goes beyond your actual physical community. And you can collaborate and educate through that network that didn't exist when the first independent living movement happened in the 70s. And I'm really excited to see how that social media plays in the current disability rights movement. However, I do think it's important to talk about the fact that social media also plays a negative role in the disability rights movement by glamorizing or incorrectly portraying people with disabilities, such as like short videos that like, if you relate to these things, then you have, OCD, right? And I think that's a really harmful idea as someone with OCD, and I think it's kind of ridiculous. I also think that social media needs to really be careful in uplifting disabled creators and understanding the impact of what people are saying when they're talking about disabilities, especially like uncredible people. And especially like the authenticity of creators. But like I said, I'm also really excited to see how social media evolves with the movement.
Thank you so much, Sonya. Other panelists?
Hi, this is April. So before I talk about social media, before I forget, a minute ago I spoke about the Disability Access Education Revolving Fund, and I got tongue-tied for a second and couldn't remember the what the local fund is called. It's called the Access Compliance Fund. And so at the state architect level, 10% of those business license fees goes to the state architect. And that's the DAR fund, but at the local level, the 90% retention is called the Access Compliance Fund, and municipalities can talk to CCDA or the Pacific ADA Center about what they should be doing with those dollars and how to make sure that they're reporting those uses of those dollars to the Division of the State Architect. Sorry that I jumped into your question, Presley. I will say, I don't know how I could say it better than Sonya did, but I think that, social media, like other art forms, both reflects the culture that we live in and also has the opportunity to impact the culture. So just like a TV show, back in the 80s, like I remember watching like after school specials where, the person with the disability was like the friend and came on and, told Brenda how awesome she was or whatever, or person with people with disabilities sort of played a background role in TV and videos and things like that, or sometimes harmful stereotypes were spread. But then also sometimes you could have a discussion and it could make, people watching those shows change. And so that was kind of my generational, growing up in the 80s and 90s, my vantage point. But I will say that I think social media really has the opportunity to to really help people with disabilities, speak to the world in their own unique voice. I have a friend who, she used to have a blog called CP Shoes, where she talked about shoes and having cerebral palsy and like a lot of the issues of the day. And I used to follow that blog. It was really cool. And so I just think the important thing is to make sure that people with disabilities are the ones that are being elevated in talking about their own stories. So I think for too long, people without disabilities were the ones that were crafting behind the scenes, being the writers, being the producers of content that was about disability, that wasn't necessarily reflecting that true experience. So just as Sonya said, uplifting disabled creators, like Kia Brown and others who does a lot of writing, for example. So I kind of went beyond the social media just for generational media reasons, but there's just a lot of content creation out there. And there's so many different perspectives in the disability community. I like to say that like the disability community is like a kaleidoscope of people, so many different people and perspectives that we should be uplifting.
And this is Jan speaking. And I know we're about to get to our questions section, so I just wanted to say a couple things on social media. One is there's a lot of interesting creators out there that are doing interesting things. Go find them, look up, what would be interesting to you. Make sure that your social media posts are accessible. There are ways to make your social media posts accessible. And also, I love to see, examples of people of color, people with a variety of disabilities in social media posts, but please don't use AI to create your people with disabilities. We can tell that it's not somebody with a disability. And I want you to use people with disabilities as models, as people who get paid to be in social media, photographs and videos, etc. So please don't use AI to do that, and make your social media accessible. So.
Thank you so much, Jan. And Whitney?
April, I don't want to interrupt anything, but I actually have to get going. But from what I had texted you earlier, I just wanted to ask when would be a good time for us to talk about it, but I don't want to interrupt anymore. But I just wanted to ask about it real quick.
I got you, Whitney. No worries. I'll text you back. Thanks for participating.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Whitney. Okay, we will move on to the last question.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Have a great day. All right. Last question. What will disability rights look like in 10 years? Sonya, I see you talking, but you are muted.
Sorry. We just want to be mindful of the time. I think that something I really want to highlight is Disability Pride Month. I looked it up and it started in 2015, but only recently, as April kind of mentioned, I started to see it around at my local library and at the Bay Area museums. I've been seeing exhibits or stands about Disability Pride Month, and I really hope in the next 10 years we get to see more, because it's really cool to see a month that's about us.
Thank you so much, Sonya. Jan and April, before we go to the Q&A, is there anything you'd like to say to the last question?
Yeah, just I hope that Olmstead will apply to everybody, even people who work, in terms of services and supports. And I also hope that that, like Sonya was saying, kind of next year is the 35th anniversary of the ADA, right? Let's do something big for Disability Pride Month. Let's do, pride parades around the country. Let's do some interesting social media. Let's do some interesting webinars. Let's do some kind of thinking out of the box about what we should do to celebrate the 35th anniversary, and really encourage people to make full inclusion of everyone a reality, and universal design a reality in our world. So that's kind of my hope for next year and the years beyond.
Oh, thanks, everybody. I'll keep it brief because I'm really looking forward to hearing from the audience. This is April. You know, when I think about disability rights, I feel like the disability community has really been involved in a reckoning to really recognize that, you know, we're an intersectional community, that the disability community comprises of every single type of human on the planet. Could have it, you could, and disability is a community that you can enter into or exit at any time. And whether you know, some people have temporary disabilities, you know, so, and also I think that there's also, my hope in the next 10 years is that people who are involved in other social justice movements, whether it's for, you know, race, gender, LGBTQI plus rights, other rights, that they can realize that they have members with disabilities that they should uplift. You know, maybe they should be at the front of the march, you know, and make sure that we always keep in the forefront of our mind that we're, you know, being inclusive to everyone. And that the disability community, I think, is doing a much better job of recognizing members that we may have forgotten about in the past, and uplifting those voices and letting them tell their stories. And if some of us need to take a step back, so other people can take a step forward. And that doesn't mean we're going away. It just means that we're recognizing that we need to do that sometimes. So that's what I'd like to see, is just more leaning into the intersectionality piece and the youth piece, which Sonya articulated really beautifully, and so did Whitney. So that's what I'd like to say about that. Looking forward to our Q&A.
Thank you. I would like to thank all our panelists for your answers and for bringing in your real life experiences. Our next section, we will go into our question and answers. We have received a Q&A, and one of the questions that we have, there was mention earlier of the ACA section 1557 being the rule that determined that medical offices require having accessible items like exam tables. I thought that the recent updates on section 504 established that.
I think, oh, hold on.
Sorry.
Yes, I think that that person is correct. It's actually the Rehabilitation Act amendments that have looked at medical diagnostic equipment and not the section 1557 updates to ACA. But the 1557, it does say you cannot discriminate. So you still need to be able to provide all the healthcare modifications and non-discrimination under the ACA. But yes, the equipment is really under the Rehabilitation Act. That is correct.
Thank you so much for your answer, Jan. One of the questions that we received, if I am starting an online shop with crafting and have get-togethers twice a month in my home, do I need to make accommodations?
I'm sorry, Presley, could you repeat the last part of that question?
Yes, no problem. I'll just repeat the whole question so you have it.
Okay.
If I am starting an online shop with crafting get-togethers twice a month in my home, do I need to make any accommodations?
Well, yeah, actually, so in-home businesses, you do actually need to make sure you have an accessible route to your business and that you have an accessible entrance. So it's basically barrier removal, because it would be covered under ADA Title III as a private business. So you need to remove barriers that you can that are readily achievable in the, like, the route into your house, into your entrance. And then if people intend to use your restroom, maybe making sure your restroom is accessible. So removing all the barriers that you can that are readily achievable for you. And that means what you can do within your budget, that is not an undue burden for you. But there definitely are obligations for in-home businesses. Yes.
Thank you for your answer, Jan. Due to time, I will be passing it back to our Executive Director, Dawson Rawlings, and we will share some resources.
Thanks, Presley. I just want to thank everyone for being here today. I just want to share a couple of resources on disability rights laws and other things. First of all, for CCDA, you could go to our website at www.ccda.org. www.dgs.ca.gov/CCDA. We have a resources page as well as a business connect page. You could find information about all of our recorded public meetings, webinars like these, as well as our listening forums that are also recorded. You can also find our accessible parking toolkit, our dining toolkit, and some of our construction related toolkits as well. And you can also go to learn more about Olmstead. You could go to olmsteadrights.org. You could go to the California Civil Rights Office at calcivilrights.ca.gov. You could also go to the U.S. Department of Justice at www.justice.gov. And the Health and Human Services, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services is at www.hhs.gov. And the ADA National Network is at adata.org. So there's lots of great information. You can find the majority of this on our website as well. And I'll pass it to Jan for to talk about other resources.
Yeah.
I'm gonna turn this off, sorry.
Okay. I just wanted to say, so there's lots of information out there. I would just generally refer you to our website at adapacific.org. I think most, if not all, of these resources can be reached from our website or from ada.gov, which is the U.S. Department of Justice website. And that includes some tax incentive tips. Remember, businesses, you have tax incentives when you remove barriers. And so you should use those. And also the Certified Access Specialist or CASP inspection program that April mentioned earlier is also really, really helpful to know. And I just wanted to reiterate April's statement that I really want, I'm looking forward to young people coming up and like Sonya and like Whitney and others and taking the ADA to the next level and taking inclusion and access to the next level. And I just really am looking forward to seeing that. So I hope that that's where we go in the next 10 years.
And this is April. You know, I spoke about this a moment ago, but you could stay connected with CCDA by going to, you can email us at ccda@dgs.ca.gov. Also, all of our meetings are open to the public and subject to public meeting laws such as Bagley-Keene. So I highly encourage you to go to our meetings section of our website to learn about when our next meetings are. Our full commission meetings are quarterly. The next one will be in October. And we will have both a Zoom link to participate remotely as well as an in-person location, which will be, we're still deciding where we're going to be in October. So check out our website for that. We always go to a different part of the state every other time. And so we're doing our best in 2025, especially to get out to other places besides just Sacramento and Los Angeles. Although Sacramento and Los Angeles are important, there's also other parts of the state too. So we'll be getting out there more next year also. We also have subcommittees. If you're not a commissioner, a great way to also participate in the life of CCDA is through our subcommittees. We have an education and outreach subcommittee, a checklist subcommittee, which is where a lot of our toolkits are born. And we also have a legislative subcommittee that you could learn about laws that are being passed in the state legislature that we're tracking. So I encourage you to go to our website under our meetings tab.
Okay, and I mentioned this earlier for Pacific ADA Center. You can call us at 1-800-949-4232, toll free. And you can email us at info@adapacific.org. And I really encourage you to check out our website at adapacific.org. It's in plain language. It should be easy to navigate. And we've got lots and lots of information there for everyone with rights and or responsibilities under the law. We also really encourage you to subscribe to our newsletter. And that link is on the left, adapacific.org/subscribe, because we do a monthly newsletter and it has lots of great information in it. So we encourage you to stay in touch with us and follow us on social media as well.
And with that, I would like to thank everyone for coming. I would like to thank our panelists, and I hope that everyone has a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.